Hey all, Heber here. So if you watched my last top 10 video, which was on the best premium cruisers of 2021, or I guess up until the end of 2021, because there were some really old ones in there, like as well as for example Targo. This is my new video, and instead of premium cruisers, we are looking at the free cruisers, or tech tree cruisers, or standard cruisers, whatever you want to call them. Basically the ones that are included within the game, and you don't have to get any doubloons out of your pocket to play these things here. All you have to do is grind the game. So they're free, in other words, and let's just get started. So first I just want to say yet again that this is my personal top 10, and I judge cruisers not only on their carrying potential, but also on how much fun they are to play, and a lot of other variables. So my number 10 is the German Tier 4 cruiser, the Koenigsberg. This cruiser is a really good all-rounder, and it's also one of the best cruisers to practice your armor-piercing skills on, because this is one of those cruisers that really reward you when you line up a perfect AP shot. Of course, it also has a great sonar because it is a German cruiser, and it has great torpedo armament as well, and then something that pretty much the German nation is the only one that could boast about is that they have such an assortment of cruiser captains that like there's pretty much a cruiser captain for any taste in the German lineup. There's like you can do your agile builds, you can do your ghost builds, you can do your AP builds, HE builds, and anything in between. Obviously also spec into torpedoes or whatever your heart desires. It's one of the most versatile nations when it comes to cruiser builds. So also a good place to start, especially with Koenigsberg here. Like I said, it'll teach you to get your AP down. Next up, we have another armor-piercing focused cruiser, and that is the French Tier 4, the Emil Bertar. And again, you have a wealth of builds on this thing here. It doesn't have the great sonar, or as good a sonar as Koenigsberg does, but it's much faster and slightly more maneuverable. It has long-range torps, but it also has quite a slow reload, especially for a Tier 4 cruiser. And that's one of the reasons I like this ship here, because just like Koenigsberg, if you line up a good shot and you fire your guns, you are pretty much sure to be rewarded with nice citadels. And I mean, that is a good feeling, and it makes the game fun. And it will also teach you how to survive in the more fragile cruisers, Emil Bertar here, because it is a fragile cruiser, and you don't have as many build options with the French commanders as you do with the German ones, but there's still plenty of ways to make this ship here work out for you. And if you can get those AP salvos down, again you will be rewarded handsomely in this ship here. It is great fun. Alright, so at number 8 we step up a tier to tier 5, where we find the Bodo Honey. And this is a Russian light cruiser, and incidentally it is one of the, well actually the only Russian cruiser that I like. And like I said, it sits at tier 5, and again you have quite a big selection of commanders to put on it. And I tend to go with the build that's shown here, a ghost build, and when I don't do that, I have an agile build on it. And the reason I like Bodo Honey, just like the other two cruisers basically, is because it is a very powerful armor-piercing cruiser. And although I also like HE cruisers, and I especially like the Targo, well, where my heart really lies is with the armor-piercing focused of the kind. Bodo Honey has a very powerful, very accurate, fast-firing guns and really good AP shells, like I kind of alluded to earlier. You also have torpedoes, but they're super short range. They're like 4 kilometers, so they're very situational. And the most important thing with this cruiser here is that you get a radar at tier 5. Don't forget that. Okay, so at number 7 here we're leaving the middle and lower tiers behind, and we find our first tier 7 cruiser. And it is the Malfi. And this cruiser is fast. Even with a non-speed focused build, it goes around 40 knots. And of course, if you spec into speed, this thing will go 43, 44 knots with no problems at all. It's a very, very powerful cruiser, but it's also a very finicky cruiser. Primarily because you don't get a sonar on the Italian Tech Tree cruisers, at least not so far. And as much as I regret that being the case, Amalfi is still very, very powerful. It turns a lot faster than you'd think it should, judging by the specs alone. And obviously you get the Italian skill or gimmick or whatever you want to call it, which is the rolling smoke. And this thing is great. You can pop it in a situation like this where you want to show broadside to a nasty cruiser and get your torps off, and the smoke will cover you and keep you safe. And that way it can really get you out of some really, really bad situations, which is why I enjoy this ship here. I'm not much of a smoke cruiser player. For example, on Edinburgh I don't use smoke, I use radar, and I really only like the smoke here because it is rolling. That is the main thing with the smoke here. I can still keep moving and still be a menace. Okay, so at number 6 we find an oldie but a goodie, and it is the French tier 7 cruiser Martel. And this is the original agile cruiser in the game. It's the first cruiser I worked on getting my agile build perfect on, and I believe Roux, I have actually Lemonnier on the ship here, but Roux is my commander, the one I usually use, and I think he was the first agile commander I got all the way to level 16-4, where agile builds really, really shine. And Martel has always been a favorite of mine. Like, the DPM on this ship here is great. It has very fast firing guns at around 8 seconds, and it was also recently given a heal. For a long time Martel didn't have a heal as one of the only tier 7 cruisers because it was just performing so well. But Wargaming decided to be nice to us and actually gave it a heal, and that has made this ship here viable in the games today against legendary ships. It's still quite a squishy cruiser, and it does have the spaced armor that'll get you out of some trouble, but obviously not all trouble. And again, many different builds, and of course you get the wonderful speed boost on the Martel as well. Okay, so at number 5 we have what is probably the most difficult ship to play in this top 10 here, and probably in the game actually. And it is the British tier 7 heavy cruiser, the Baltimore. And I use an agile build on this ship here for the simple reason that you need to be able to angle your armor constantly, because you cannot bow tank in this ship and you cannot stern tank. And of course you cannot show your broadside either, because this ship has pretty much the biggest stepped citadel in the game, and you have to be awake and you have to be able to react very, very quickly in this ship here. It is super maneuverable, and it is a lot of fun to play, and it does have a radar. I remember there was a pretty big surprise when this ship came out that it actually had a radar. I didn't expect that, and I don't think many people did, because on PC it doesn't have a radar. But like any cruiser with a radar is super, super powerful, and Baltimore has pretty much the same HE output as a Targo, except it costs 50% of the reload. So do not underestimate this ship here, and yes, it is a difficult, quirky ship to play, but it's also very, very rewarding. So at number 4 we have a ship I pretty much never play, and it's one of the ships I despise the most in the game. Not because it's bad, because it's really, really good, and I think it's a little bit too good for its own good, really. There was a lot of goods in one sentence there. So Cleveland is a high explosive focused cruiser, although the AP is also very, very good if you can get to use it, especially up close at broadside cruisers and also at battleship superstructures when they are, for example, broadside at a distance. Most people play this as an HE spammer, as we like to call it, just like in this clip here, where you keep an island between yourself and your target, and you can just, you know, go to town on them without actually having to worry about anything. So like mentioned, Cleveland is one of the most powerful cruisers in the game, simply because damage output of this thing here is just insane. And if you get into the right battles and you get into the right positions and you are facing the right opponents, you can get absolutely amazing games in this thing here. Like I said, mostly high explosives focused, and for some people that's not really the thing, but for other people that's really what they like to do. So it's a bit of a divisive ship, I guess. Battleships players tend to really dislike it, and you know, cruiser players tend to love it. But there's no doubt about the fact that it is a very powerful ship that certainly wins games. Alright, so at number 3 we have another oldie but a goodie, and this one has been with us all the time Legends has existed. The American Tier 7 heavy cruiser Baltimore was one of the original ships you could research back when the game came out, and there was only 3 nations available, I think. And it's still a very, very strong ship, and it all comes down to the fact that it's really, really tanky, and it has a great radar. Other than that, Baltimore is also an armor-piercing focused ship, although the high explosives are also quite useful on it in a pinch. But really, the American super heavy armor-piercing rounds is what you really should be using on this ship here. They are nasty if you actually can get a citadel like I didn't manage to do here. Baltimore has a radar, of course, making it a very powerful cruiser, and it's also a very good cruiser for people who usually play battleships to start to get their feet wet into the world of cruisers, because Baltimore, it pretty much plays like a battleship, and it's not particularly agile, and of course it's lacking torpedoes, which in situations like this is quite a problem. But other than that, it is a great ship, and it is definitely one you should start out with if you are starting into high tier cruisers. Okay, so at number 2 we find a more recent addition to the game, and it is the Tier 7 British light cruiser, the Edinburgh. Now calling this a light cruiser isn't really that fair, I think, because Edinburgh is very heavily armed. And I realize light cruisers are designated by their guns, but in this case I don't think it's really a fair distinction. Although it is a recent addition to the game, Edinburgh has actually been a part of the lineup for a long time now, and it is an extremely powerful ship. One thing about this ship is that there are so many builds that you can put on this thing, and especially the fact that you have to choose between a radar or a smoke just makes the playstyle completely different depending on what you choose. If you go with a smoke build, it's better to go with something like either actually spec into smoke or spec into range and AP and stuff like that. And if you go with a radar build, you can spec into something that's a little bit more agile and interesting to play. So the flexibility in this ship here is just amazing, and it's also one of the more powerful, if not one of the most powerful cruisers in the game, simply down to its versatility and the way it can deal with pretty much any situation. And don't forget that amazing heal as well. Alright, so we made it to my top pick here, and it is unsurprisingly the tier 7 German heavy cruiser, the Admiral Heber. And the reason I picked this ship for the number 1 spot is that it's kind of a mix between Baltimore and Edinburgh, and it takes the best from both, and you end up with what is an extremely powerful cruiser. It wasn't always like that though. Heber got a buff to its guns for about 6 months ago, and before that Heber was actually last on my list. I believe last year it was number 10. And this buff to the guns, along with Azure Lane Baltimore and Arpeggio Takao as inspirations, have allowed for a damage dealing tier 7 heavy cruiser that is just such a nasty encounter for anyone, that it is now, in my opinion, the best tech tree cruiser in the game. It even outperforms its premium cousin, the Prince Eugen, which used to be my favorite cruiser overall. But now I believe the crown belongs to Heber, and I think it will belong to Heber for quite the foreseeable future, to be honest. So that was my pick for the 10 best tech tree cruisers in World of Warships Legends for this year. Now hopefully next year we're going to get a lot of new cruisers, and especially some legendary cruisers, I hope, because that's what this game really needs. Now I know the British Minotaur is coming, well, soon, but really we need a lot more than that. We need some new Japanese and some new French legendary cruisers, and yeah, as many as we can possibly get. So again, this was my top 10, and if you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you out there.